Good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. Jimmy here in Chicago. Got a unique story tonight. We're going to talk about the Chicago Outfits connection and interest in all of our great sporting teams. See, a lot of outfit guys, their family, friends, associates were big time sports fans. Chicago Bears, Blackhawks, Chicago Bulls, Cubbies, White Sox. Some of the outfit guys, associates, family, and friends would go to a lot of games. Some of them would work the venue. Others would hustle the venue. We all know there's big money in sporting venues, and anywhere where there's big money, you can guarantee the outfit wants a piece of that. But before I drop the story tonight, and before I head out, we got a little bit of an anniversary to celebrate. 38 years ago on this day, June 14th, 1986, is when the Spilotro brothers were killed. The Spilotro brothers murders was one of the most infamous murders of the Chicago outfit. We all know the story. The movie Casino was pretty much spot on, except at the end. These guys never got beat with baseball bats in the cornfield. Most of you have heard this many times, but right before Chicago outfit boss Joe Rus went away to prison when he got pinched for the strawman case, it was him, Joe Lombardo, Jack Sarno, Angelo LaPetria, a Chicago cop, the Milwaukee crime boss, and two of his sons got pinched in that indictment, a mobbed up guy in Cleveland, and a couple mob bosses in Kansas City. There was 15 defendants, and they got pinched for skimming millions of dollars of 4 mobbed up hotel casinos in Nevada. We all know the story. But right before IUPA went to the can, he told Sam Carlisi and Joe Ferriola, I want both brothers knocked down. I don't care how you do it, 1 and 2, just do it. He was so pissed off and how they fucked everything up in Vegas, he was foaming at the mouth. Now, what a lot of people didn't know up into the trial was they were first going to kill the Spilotros in Nevada. Nicky Calabrese testified that Jimmy Marcelo gave him an Uzi and 2 grenades. He took a train from Union Station, downtown Chicago, all the way out to Nevada, where he met with other guys of the hit team. They all showed up separately. Guys like John Feccarata, Frankie Schweiss, Jimmy Poker. But they couldn't really get the brothers together. They couldn't really get both of them together. Nick Calabrese testified that one day he saw Michael Spilotro driving around in a real fancy brown minivan, and on the plate it said Solozzi and Edelson. That's a very popular mobbed up car dealership in Chicago. Now, as weeks went by, the outfit bosses back home were getting a little antsy. They wanted these 2 guys taken care of immediately. When they give a green light on a guy, they expect it done ASAP. Frankie Schweiss suggested that they would kill the Spilotro brothers with the Uzi when they came out of a court building in Nevada. Tony Spilotro had a court hearing, and they were going to kill him right there on the courtroom steps. But they thought there was no way they'd get away with it. It would bring a lot of heat, and that could piss off the outfit bosses. So they went to plan B. And as I testified in many times, as I talked about many times, Nicky Calabrese testified that it was Jimmy Marcelo, underboss of the Chicago outfit, or boss at the time, underboss at the time, that he was the one that set up the Spilotro brothers. He was good friends with them. They trusted him. Nick Calabrese said that Jimmy Marcelo picked up him, Nick Calabrese, John Feccarata, and Jimmy LaPetria. He picked them up in a real fancy minivan at a Venture parking lot, and he dropped those three men off at the house in Bensenville. Then little Jimmy went and picked up Michael and Tony Spilotro and brought them to the house. Nick testified he got there a little early, and when he got there, John Feccarata beelined it right to the bathroom. Nicky noticed he was in there a long time. He said when he came out, he was white as a ghost. Feccarata thought the hit was for him. Nick said he heard a voice say, "They're here." He said he got tense. He knew what was about to go down. He said all the guys had gloves on. When Nick Calabrese testified at the Family Secrets trial, these were just 2 of 14 unsolved murders, but this by far was one of the highlights of the trial. You could literally hear a pin drop. But Nicky Calabrese went into great detail. He said that Michael Spilotro walked down the stairs first. Nicky greeted him because he was friends with him with a smile and a handshake. Then he immediately grabbed his ankles, tackling him, while Louis the Mooch, Louis Ebele, strangled Michael with a rope. Nick testified that Michael didn't put up a fight, and he went easily. A .22 caliber gun fell out of Michael's pants. John No-Nose DeFranzo picked it up, unloaded it, and then wiped a smudge of blood off the wall. So Tony Spilotro, he actually witnessed his brother getting killed right in front of him. He started yelling and screaming that you guys are going to get in a lot of trouble. Then he asked to say a prayer. Prayer was denied. But according to Nick Calabrese, if you believe his testimony, all these gentlemen in the photo personally were there. All the heavyweights, some of them bosses in the outfit, they were personally there, and they brutally beat and stomped Tony Spilotro to death. They could easily killed him, but that's how pissed off that they were. They literally wanted to get their licks in. Boss of Chicago outfit, Joe Ferriola, was there. John No-Nose DeFranzo, Louis Tomato Marino, John Feccarata, Jimmy LaPetria, Louis Ebele, Louis the Mooch, Sam Carlisi, Jimmy Marcelo, and Al Taco. These are the men, according to Nick Calabrese, that killed the Spilotro brothers. Now, some people don't believe Nick Calabrese. They think he put some of these heavyweights there just to make his story bigger. I found it incredible, though, for the most part. He had so much detail going back to the 1970s. I did catch him in a couple white lies, but if I'm on that jury, I probably would have had some reasonable doubt. But I think the reason these men were there, they wanted to personally get their kicks and licks in. That's how pissed off they were at the brothers. And then we all know there was a botched burial. A different crew was responsible for the burial of the Spilotro brothers. That consisted of John Feccarata, Al Taco, and a couple other guys I'm forgetting. If you know the guys that were involved in the botched burial, please enter into your comments. While the Spilotros were MIA, there was a junkyard northwest of the city. They thought maybe the Spilotro brothers were there. Sure enough, the junkyard turned up empty. But they were looking all over for these guys. Dr. Pat Spilotro was obsessed with his brother's murders, was visiting all the maid guys and associates of Chicago outfit in federal prisons, asking them who killed my brothers and why. He eventually became an informant because he wanted vengeance on the guys that killed his brothers. But again, 38 years ago today, I was fresh out of high school, is when Michael and Tony Spilotro were brutally beaten and stomped to death. June 14th, 1986. Now, as some of us may know, a lot of Italians, a lot of Chicago outfit guys, associates, family, and friends are big-time Chicago Blackhawks fans. And back in the day, especially at the old United Center, this was the hottest ticket in town. A lot of the older Blackhawk guys like Dennis Savard, Al Secord, Chelios, Keith Magnuson, Probert, and others used to socialize and party with the mob guys. Some of these guys were big-time partiers. I remember going to the Blackhawks games in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and almost every game I would see an outfit guy, associate, a family, or friend. Same with the Bulls in the early 1990s. This was probably the hottest ticket in town. Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls, 6-time world champions. And we all know Michael Jordan had a big-time gambling problem. I'm pretty sure he worked with a couple of the local bookies, if you will. And some of the guys, I'd rather not mention their names, were deadbeat gamblers. These guys would have high-stake poker games and lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then they would borrow money from loan sharks, mobbed up loan sharks, to pay off some of their gambling debt. Some of them got in so much trouble where they either had to come up with the money that was owed, or they would sign over their house, car, jewelry, or any valuables that they had. The mob guys never really wanted to use violence because they liked some of these professional athletes. And also, if they knew they hurt them, obviously if they're injured, they can't play. That would also draw a lot of heat. So what they would ask some of them to do is not actually throw the game, but maybe miss a couple free throws or fumble the ball in football to make sure that they covered the spread. However it favored, the better. So say, for example, a basketball player owed the outfit $150,000. They didn't want to hurt him. They really didn't want to take his sports car, although they would. They'd ask him to throw a couple games, and they would clear out that debt. And most of these guys, they wanted no trouble with the Chicago outfit. They knew of our reputation. So make no mistake about it, they definitely would do a few things to either lose the game or win the game by an X amount of points. Hopefully that stuff doesn't go on today. I think it still does, especially in some of those shady NFL games. But back then in the 80s and 90s, a lot of these professional athletes were in big-time debt to some of the outfit guys. Now here's these guys here. This is gate 3.5. Right there at the old Chicago Stadium. Most of us know this. This is where Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Chelios, all the Hawks, all the Bulls players parked their car. This is where they entered. This is where the media would enter, the players' families, a lot of celebrities, VIPs, big shots would all come and go right there on gate 3.5. We used to hang out at gate 3.5 just to get photos and autographs. And then here, these gentlemen in the yellow jackets are all Chicago cops. Not really mob cops, but definitely acquaintances, friends of the Chicago outfit. As I mentioned in my prior videos, Chicago mob had a lot of Chicago police officers that they were in cahoots with. But the guy right there in front of Jordan with the beard, that's the late Detective Joe Rus. He was actually an organized crime detective, and he was one of Michael Jordan's personal bodyguards. So Jordan, number one man in the league at the time, he didn't fuck around. He surrounded himself with all Chicago detectives with connections. Here's Michael Jordan's personal security guard I just talked about, Chicago organized crime detective Joe Rus. Anywhere you've seen Jordan on TV, there's a good chance you saw Joe Rus. I used to make a joke that he used to follow Jordan around and kiss his ass, but that eventually pissed him off. But this is the late Joe Rus, organized crime detective. That was one of Michael Jordan's security guards. Here we got the old Chicago Stadium. Anytime you went to an event here, whether it was a Bulls game or a Hawks game, there was always something dramatic that happened. You could actually smoke in here. We used to sneak in here for free. But a lot of Chicago outfit guys would go here to attend games. Some of them were given comped tickets. Some of them actually worked here. And some of them did a lot of business at the old Chicago Stadium. Eventually, they tore it down. They built the United Center, which still stands today right there in the West Loop. This is where they have all kinds of good concerts, Chicago Blackhawks games, Chicago Bulls games. They say this is the house that Jordan built. But when this place was being constructed, some of the contractors were associates of the Chicago outfit. Now, anytime there was a Bulls game, a Hawks game, or a concert at the United Center, there's always great bars and restaurants to go before the game, and always great bars and great restaurants to go bars after the game. One of our favorites, and this is on the way to the United Center, right there on Lake Ogden in Ashland, is you got La Luce. This was an old mobbed-up restaurant that we used to go to before a lot of your Bulls games and Hawks games. It's owned by the Moretti family, good friends with Joe Lombardo, Mikey Switek, Chrissy Spina. This is where most of the Grand Avenue crew and associate like to hang out. And back in the day, they used to have legendary Super Bowl parties here, major gambling going on, everybody smoking cigarettes, cigars, an amazing full spread of food. And if you wanted, you could even get lucky at some of the upstairs apartments. But this is La Luce. Unfortunately, this place is closed, but this was a great restaurant to go to before the game. And a lot of Chicago Blackhawks, guys like Stan Mikita, Bobby Hall, Keith Magnuson, Al Secor. I mean, the list goes on and on. They used to love and wine and dine here because nobody bothered them. Another place still today that we used to go to before Hawks, Bulls games or concerts, right in my neighborhood, you got Salerno's right there on Grand and Receipt. This is a great neighborhood joint. It's been around for years. No relation to the mob guy, Bobby Salerno, but a lot of your Chicago outfit associates and some of the Grand Avenue crew used to hang out Salerno's back in the day. Now, my favorite place to go before a Bulls or a Hawks game is Greek Islands. Now, you don't really have a lot of time before some of these games. So at Greek Islands, they have free valet parking. They have authentic, delicious Greek food, very reasonable price. So you can eat, drink, and be out of there within a half hour, jump in the car, and still make it to the game in time. But this is one of the few Greek restaurants left in Greektown. I highly recommend going to Greek Islands. This is my go-to before any Bulls or any Blackhawks game. And many years ago, when the restaurant closed in Greektown and the restaurants closed in Chinatown, these were turned into full-blown casinos. Chicago outfit had $1 million illegal gambling operation going on after hours. And as I said before in some of my prior stories during the Family Secrets trial, Frankie Calabrese had pretty much every bartender, every busboy, every cook, every waiter, every manager in Greektown on his payroll. They were either gambling with the Calabrese brothers or borrowing money from Frank. But this is Greek Islands, still around in Chicago in the West Loop, one of my favorites. Now, after the hockey game, especially if the Hawks won, we would all go to this neighborhood joint in Lincoln Park called Stanley's. And this was a special place because you never know who would go in here. So picture going to a Blackhawks game, and then after the game, some of the hockey players would go in here. I've seen several Chicago Blackhawks here, a couple Chicago Cubs here. I've seen Kid Rock, Eddie Vedder, John Cusack, Jeremy Piven. But this was probably the best bar to go to after any Blackhawks game. This is kind of like a Chicago Blackhawks bar. Unfortunately, the owner passed away. and they eventually closed this place. But this Stanley's Kitchen and Tap, this was probably the best place to go after a Hawks game. And going back then, even today, the best classic dive bar in Chicago, hands down, is Richard's Bar. This is another great bar to go to after a Hawks game or a Bulls game. They open I think 8, 9 in the morning. They're open till 2 in the morning. They're open 365 days a year. Drinks are like $2-3. They've got the best jukebox in the city. They've got pictures, old school pictures all over the wall. A lot of characters here. Back in the day, you always saw Chicago outfit associates, maid guys, family, friends here in the restaurant La Scarola. Definitely would check this place the next time you're in Chicago, Richard's Bar. But I bring up Richard's Bar because, again, this was a great bar to go to and hang out after a Blackhawks game. Now we're going to talk about some of the mob guys that were big-time Blackhawks fans and Bears fans. We got this Mama Luke here, Sal Bastone, made member of Chicago outfit. He was a big-time Chicago Bears fan, good friends with Jim McMahon, Kevin Butler, Otis Wilson, Richard Dent, Ditka. He was a season ticket holder, not only for the Chicago Bears, but for the Chicago Blackhawks as well. Joe Lombardo was a big-time Blackhawk fan. He would treat a lot of kids in the neighborhood, mostly at the old stadium before he got pinched for bribing Howard Cannon. But in the prior to the early 1990s, when he came home from prison in the early 1990s, he resumed and would go to several Blackhawks games. Jimmy Marcelo, made member, boss of Chicago outfit. He is still in prison today, and he was convicted in the family secrets trial based on Nick Calabrese testimony. But little Jimmy has several family members, associates that all work at the United Center, used to work at the Chicago Stadium. I'd rather not mention their names, but Jimmy Marcelo definitely has some of his family and friends that work at some of the sporting venues. I'll never forget the time I actually went to a hockey game with Mikey Switek and his brother Joe Switek. They had season tickets. We were way up in the nosebleeds. I thought poor Mikey was going to have a heart attack climbing up all those stairs. But this is a legend in the Grand Avenue neighborhood, Mikey Switek. He's hopefully in heaven with his family. But him, his brother, and a lot of guys in the Chicago Grand Avenue neighborhood used to always go to the Blackhawk games back in the day. I remember I went to this trial, Mike Spano Sr. and Spano Jr., boss of the Cicero crew. These two gentlemen here in Betty Long Maltese skimmed $12 million from the town of Cicero. Actually went to that trial, and shortly after trial, who do I see? 100 level, Mike Spano Jr., season ticket holder. So again, a lot of Italians are big-time hockey fans, especially Chicago Blackhawk fan. Another Chicago outfit associate I used to see at the Blackhawk game was Peter Chivarelli. He's actually used to own Demon Dogs, Notre Dame football player. This guy's kind of like a legend of Chicago outfit. He's a real character, and he actually managed that band, the band Chicago. But I remember seeing him always with beautiful women at the United Center. Another guy I used to see at all the Hawks games was Tony Borsellino's son, one of the biggest traders in the S&P. You got Louis and his brother Joey Borsellino. This guy's a legend at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. We all know his father was a heavyweight in the Taylor Street crew, part of the Wild Bunch. His father was one of the men allegedly that took part in the brutal torture and murder of some of those burglars that broke into Tony Accardo's house. And then to tie up loose ends, unfortunately, Joe Upa's driver, Dinger, and Tony Borsellino was very well liked by the Chicago outfit. was killed for his part in those burglar murders. But I used to see this guy and his brother, as well as several other associates, at the Chicago Blackhawks game. A lot of these guys, because they've got big money, they can afford the season tickets. And then old friend of mine, I mentioned to this guy before, the late Rocky LaValle. His father was a close associate of the 26th Street crew, Shorty LaValle. I did a couple stories on him. I met him at Kozel's Pool Hall. Fast forward, he sat next to me every day at the Family Secrets Trial until he got kicked out. He could not control his big mouth. He actually tried to smuggle Frank Calabrese, one of the defendants, some Italian salami, which they consider contraband. And Rocky got caught, and he was barred from the Dirksen Federal Building, or barred from the courtroom. But I bring him up because he was not only a big-time Chicago Blackhawks fan, but he was we'll call him like an amateur semi-pro hockey player. He could have been an assistant coach. If he would have not got involved in that life, he could have been a hockey player or a coach. But this guy is like a connoisseur of hockey, very knowledgeable, and good friends with a lot of Chicago Blackhawks, past and present, and also some of the coaches. And I remember after the Family Secrets Trial, him and his crew, they robbed a pawn shop right there in the old Jewtown on Roosevelt Road. They got caught. He ended up in Menard, which is a real nasty place. He survived. But when he got out, when I seen him again, him and his sister had a booth at the Taylor Street Fest. He had on the apron, and he was showing me pictures of him fresh out of jail, hoisting the Stanley Cup, drinking out of the Stanley Cup, pictures with him, some of the Blackhawks. This is when they won the first one, I think, in 2010, and some of the hockey coaches. I think he was good friends with the goalie coach. But I was teasing him, like, Rock, not too bad, fresh out of the can, and you're drinking out of the Stanley Cup. But this is the late Rocky LaValle, a diehard Chicago Blackhawks fan. And then we all know old-time made member Chicago outfit, a boss of Chicago outfit at one time, Sam Teats Battaglia. They called him Teats because he would threaten to knock people's teeth out. His grandson, Bates Battaglia, was a professional hockey player for the Carolina Panthers. I'll never forget, I see this guy, or no, not the Carolina Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes. I seen Teats Battaglia play twice, and his family and friends were always there in the stands to support him. So that's Bates Battaglia, professional hockey player. I think he's retired now. Another guy I used to see quite a bit at the United Center, you got 26th Street made member. You got Leo Caruso. You could see him there having a nice breakfast. I seen this guy at La Vita. I seen him and his brother in court during Frankie Jr.'s trial. Actually seen him at Pompey on Taylor. But this guy was a big-time hockey fan. And again, good friends with a lot of players and coaches. Chicago Outfits, I'd rather not name the company, but they definitely were involved in ticket scalping, buying tickets at face value, marking up and reselling it, basically a ticket broker. I know several guys till this day that still have the side hustle of selling tickets. They also, not so much now, but back in the day, I'm talking like 70s, 80s, maybe the early 90s, some of the Chicago Outfit guys through a straight arrow type of guy, a legitimate businessman, they would put the parking company and valet company in the legitimate businessman's name, but they were actually behind it. They put up all the front money and got all the permits. But the Chicago Outfit definitely has influence, or had influence, and made a lot of money in the parking, the outside open parking lots outside the old stadium, United Center, Soldiers Field, Wrigley Field, and Comiskey Park. I personally know some of the guys that run some of these stadium parking venues, but these guys made millions of dollars just in parking alone. Same thing with the concessions. They would have a front company, if you will, that would get the contract to supply certain venues, whether it was Soldier Field, Wrigley Field, White Sox Park, United Center, with some of the concessions, some of the beverages, some of the liquor, some of the snacks and drinks. Big money in that, and you can rest assured the outfit was involved in that as well. And as we talked about before, a lot of these professional athletes, they like to gamble. They're just like you and I. Some of them are degenerate gamblers, and not so much now because gambling is pretty much legal now, but kind of like Pete Rose and some of the guys, some of the Detroit Pistons, some of the Chicago Bears, some of the Chicago Blackhawks would have high-stake poker games held by the Chicago outfit. They would lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, and to pay off their debt, some of them would have to give up their cars, their jewelry, their homes, businesses, or even throw a couple games. Appreciate it, man. If you guys like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Have a good weekend. Everybody stay safe and be well.